In the deep hollows of the Appalachian mountains, past the trees that whisper and the roads that don't appear on maps, there lies a cabin. Rotten wood, one window, no electricity, no neighbors. And inside it, two brothers, grown men, sleeping in the same bed, married to the same woman. Locals said they were closer than most, closer in blood, closer in bond, and in secrets. The deeper you dig, the more twisted it becomes, and yet no one talks about them, not because they forgot, but because they remember too well. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. The hills of Kentucky hold more than just silence. They hold memory. Memory buried under the weight of shame of generations who refused to look back. But the story of the Deever brothers was never just forgotten. It was hidden by kin, by preachers, by the law. Even the census stopped tracking them after 1942, but their name, spoken only in whispers, still lingers. James and Isaiah Deever were born just a year apart in a crumbling shack that barely had four walls. Their mother, Ruth, was already considered odd by the time she turned 16. Pale, withdrawn, and always alone, she gave birth to James without naming the father. A year later, she had Isaiah, and when asked again, she said, "Same as before." That was all. Locals say the boys were never seen apart. When one went to fetch water, the other carried the bucket. When one was whipped in school, the other cried. By 10, they'd stopped speaking to outsiders. By 12, they had their own dialect, a garbled version of English that only the two seemed to understand. And when Ruth died, they buried her behind the cabin. No priest, no service, just two boys with shovels. The grave was shallow. Everything about them was. Then at 23, they reappeared in town with a woman. Her name was Lila, but no one knew her. Pretty in a fragile way, eyes that didn't focus right. She said little, smiled less. What she did say was chilling. "I'm their wife. Not his, not one of them, just their." That's when the rumors started, but no one knew the truth until a child was born. The child, Samuel, was born in the dead of winter, snow piled 6 feet deep against the cabin door, and no one dared make the trek up the mountain. But when spring came, the midwife, a hardened woman named Myra Tate, climbed the ridge with supplies. What she found changed her forever. She said the baby was quiet, too quiet, eyes too far apart, fingers fused, the shape of the skull not right. The brothers didn't flinch when she pointed it out, didn't ask if he'd live or if something could be done. They only said, "He's one of us." That phrase again. One of us. Not our son, not our boy, just one of us. Samuel wouldn't be the last. Over the next 8 years, Lila would bear 3 more children, all boys, all visibly affected. The second had no teeth, the third couldn't walk, the fourth never opened his eyes. People in town started talking, but no one acted. The sheriff had gone up once, years earlier, when the rumor about the shared wife first surfaced. He came back pale, said he wouldn't risk it again, not for all the whiskey in Kentucky. He told the preacher that those boys were raised in a house with no doors, only walls. No one knew what he meant, but no one asked twice. By the early 1950s, the town had drawn an invisible border. Deliveries stopped at the base of the hill. The school removed their names from the rolls. The postmaster returned every letter with one word, undeliverable. To the rest of the world, the Deever family no longer existed, but they did exist, just outside of law, morality, and God. Lila disappeared one year, walked down the mountain barefoot, skin torn and bleeding, collapsed outside a store on Route 11. When asked what had happened, she looked up and said, "They don't let me sleep alone." That was all she said. The hospital cleaned her wounds, but before anyone could intervene, the brothers arrived. No threats, no weapons, just presence. They picked her up in silence. She didn't fight. She went back with them. No one ever saw her again. By 1961, the mountain was dead quiet. Not even birds settled near the cabin. Hunters avoided the area. Hikers crossed themselves when passing it. The Deever name was practically folklore until a young journalist from Cincinnati came snooping. His name was Thomas Elwood, fresh out of school, eager to make a name and obsessed with what he called unbroken bloodlines. He'd read a single line in an old Appalachian genealogy book: the Deever kin remain untouched by foreign branch or blade. That was enough. He drove down, asked questions, and got only silence or shaking heads. The deeper he dug, the more doors slammed. But Thomas didn't stop. He camped near the base of the mountain and made the climb alone, took photos, recorded notes, said he was going to talk to the brothers himself. That was the last anyone heard from him, at least for a while. 3 weeks later, a fisherman found Thomas's notebook floating near the river bend, pages soaked, ink smeared. But one sentence was still legible, written over and over across the last page. They speak like animals. They sleep in shifts. They are not right. Then a final word, scrawled in what looked like blood. Twins? But James and Isaiah were not twins, not exactly, and yet they may as well have been. Their features had grown indistinguishable with age, same sunken cheeks, same vacant gaze, same stooped posture from years of inbreeding and malnourishment. Their voices even carried the same tone, slow, heavy, slurred like wet fabric dragging through dirt. Rumors began to fly again, that they were no longer truly separate men, that one mind had taken over both bodies. People claimed to see them walking side by side in perfect mirror motion, one stepping left, the other right, always in sync, as if their bodies were extensions of a single source. No one could confirm, but no one could deny either. And still, no arrests, no investigations, nothing on record. It was as if the state itself had decided, leave them be, let them rot in peace. But they didn't rot, they endured. And as their sons aged, something far worse began to form, something not just unnatural but deliberate. By the 1970s, the Deever sons were fully grown and almost entirely feral. Locals called them the Shadows because they never approached in daylight. They were glimpsed at the edges of tree lines, crouched in branches, peering through windows. One boy was said to move on all fours. Another never spoke, only hissed. The townspeople didn't refer to them by name. They weren't James Jr. or Samuel. They were things. Silent, deformed observers of a world that had left them behind. Some believed there were more than 4, that Lila had given birth in secret, in the woods, to children that never saw a doctor, never learned language, never touched another human outside the family line. A hunter swore he saw 6 figures in the trees one night, naked, pale, with eyes like glass marbles, watching, waiting. And the most disturbing claim, that 2 of them had started calling themselves husband. A local girl went missing in '74. She was 13. The sheriff conducted a search, found nothing. No body, no blood. Just a trail of small footprints in the mud leading toward the ridge. They never looked up the hill. Instead, the townspeople did what they always had. They silenced each other. They told the girl's parents she probably ran away. Maybe she hitched west. The case was closed in less than 2 weeks. But behind closed doors, people began preparing. Locked doors, boarded windows. One family even moved to Ohio. And when the church held Sunday service, the preacher stopped mentioning forgiveness. He started preaching protection. A few brave souls whispered about confronting the Deever family once and for all, burning the cabin, ending the line, but no one followed through. Fear rooted deeper than morality, and some, though they would never admit it, believed the family should be left alone, not for mercy's sake, but because they feared what might happen if they weren't. One widow, who lived closest to the mountain's base, said it best. The Deever boys ain't just born of sin. They carry something older than sin, something hungry. Her house burned down a month later. No suspects, no arrests. The town eventually stopped talking altogether, not out of ignorance, out of survival. By the 1980s, the Deever line had become legend, half truth, half nightmare, but to those who lived within 30 miles of that mountain, it was still very real. Children were warned not to stray too far from home. Teenagers dared each other to drive up the old gravel path, but none ever reached the top. Tires blew out, engines failed. One boy claimed to see a pale hand press against his window just before he blacked out. There were no more verified sightings of James or Isaiah. Some say they died around 1983. Others believe they're still alive, barely human, kept alive by the rituals their mother taught them or by something far darker. But their sons, the next generation, had taken over the cabin, and what they did there made their fathers seem almost merciful. A missing persons report filed in 1987 described a drifter from Georgia last seen near the base of the ridge. He was headed north with a backpack and no plan. His final journal entry was later found at a pawn shop 50 miles away, scribbled inside a torn Bible. They live like wolves, but not like animals. There's purpose in their madness. I saw her. She was crying, but she didn't run. No one knows who she was. Some say another stolen girl. Others think one of the Deever sons took one of their own cousins from across county lines. There was no DNA, no charges, nothing traceable, just echoes. And then, silence again, until 1992 when a fire broke out on the ridge. Helicopter footage captured what looked like 5 figures running into the trees. Naked, covered in soot, moving like shadows flickering across the ground. The fire consumed the main cabin. Most assumed the Deever bloodline ended there. But the following winter, a local farmer reported sheep going missing, cleanly taken, no tracks, no blood, just vanished. He found one months later, half-eaten, hung from a tree branch 20 feet up, and carved into the bark below it 3 simple letters, D-B-B, Deever, blood, born. And so, the question began to rise once again. Had the Deever line ended, or simply evolved? Engagement. Break. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? In the years that followed, whispers turned to theories. Urban explorers claimed to have found remnants of the Deever property, half-buried tools, blood-stained furniture, a rusted cradle nailed to the wall. Others found nothing, just forest, dense and unmoved, as if the mountain had swallowed every trace of them. But one truth persisted. The bloodline wasn't just a horror story. It was a system. Each generation married within, not by accident, by design. They believed the outside world was impure, that their way, closed, controlled, unbroken, was the only way to preserve something ancient, something given to them, as one surviving relative later confessed under the influence of heavy sedation. "It's not in the genes," he said. "It's in the spirit. We're not sick. We're chosen." His name was Caleb Deever, arrested in 2003 for trespassing on a school playground. No one knew who he was at first, just a quiet man with misaligned eyes and a cleft palate. He was found digging near the swing set. When questioned, he simply said, "I was waiting for her." Authorities later found several small bones in his backpack, animal but arranged in ritual patterns. He was declared mentally unfit for trial and confined to a state hospital. There, he scribbled drawings on his walls, circular symbols, family trees with repeating names, and the same phrase again and again: "We sleep together, we bleed together, we return together." But what disturbed investigators most wasn't Caleb's ramblings, it was his DNA. He wasn't just the product of sibling breeding. His genome showed markers of at least 4 generations of intrafamilial reproduction, uncle to niece, mother to son, cousin to cousin. A closed loop, biologically unsustainable, genetically unnatural. And yet, he lived, which raised a chilling question. What else had survived? The files from his case were sealed. The hospital burned down too. Woe years later. Arson. No arrests. And Caleb's body was never found. Since then, strange signs have emerged. Hikers reporting laughter in the trees, old women claiming to see pairs of identical men walking country roads at dusk. And most unsettling of all, a child's shoe nailed to a tree deep in the Appalachian woods, next to a symbol etched into the bark, a circle within a circle. The mark of the Deever blood. There's a saying in Appalachia, some roots grow down, others grow in. The Deever family didn't just grow in, they curled inward, coiled like a snake eating its own tail. And what emerged from that spiral wasn't simply human. It was a lineage sculpted by secrecy, by isolation, by something deeper than blood, devotion. What made their story unbearable wasn't just the inbreeding, it was the clarity of their belief. They didn't see themselves as victims. They weren't ashamed. They were proud. Each malformed child was proof of loyalty. Each generation, more pure, more theirs. And Lila, the woman trapped between two brothers, wasn't the only bride. Before the fire, before the silence, there were stories of other girls, ones who never came home. The sheriff's niece in 69, the church janitor's daughter in 77, always written off as runaways. But the patterns were there, just buried beneath guilt, beneath fear. No one wanted to admit it, because to admit it would be to acknowledge that evil doesn't always arrive in the form of strangers. Sometimes it grows inside families. It's passed like an heirloom, like a curse, like a name whispered too many times in the same mouth. What's left of the Deever bloodline today? Officially, nothing. No living members, no property, no graves. But unofficially, that's harder to say. In 2016, a woman driving along Route 23 claimed to pick up a hitchhiker, a young man with long arms and sunken eyes, barefoot. He said he was looking for his brother husband. Then, without warning, he jumped from the car and vanished into the trees. A hoax? Maybe. But ask the old-timers, and they'll tell you straight. You don't get rid of blood like that. It stays in the land, in the dirt, in the womb. And so, the story of the Deever family remains, half remembered, half erased, but never truly gone. Because somewhere, in the folds of this country, hidden, in the hills, crouched in shadow, are men who still share one bed and one wife. And they are waiting.